What an amazing couple of talks we've had. Now I'm going to move into something which is probably very boring for a lot of you, but is actually, as I will show you, very important. And I'm basically going to talk to you a little bit about our journey in basically building a dashboard solution for analytics on a startup budget, and kind of what that taught us about chatbot metrics in general, kind of flipped a little bit on its head. So hi, I'm Hugo. I'm CTO/COO of String. Who are we? So we are a provider who provides basically ordering chatbots to restaurants. We white label like solutions for our clients, and we have like a solution which basically works very well in the restaurant ecosystem, targeting and providing all the stuff around menu enhancements and like point of sale integrations and customization, etc. So right when we started String, we were very clear that we were going to focus on basically metrics. You know, I think all of us here are very up on the fact that you need to focus on your user metrics if you're a startup, you know. And especially if you're a chatbot startup, it is pretty important. I mean, basically the product relies on having good user data in order to improve it. So we basically, when we started, we asked for advice. We looked to the community and said, okay, what kind of solutions are there currently that people have done to try and tackle this kind of stuff? And most people pointed towards, you know, kind of stuff like bot analytics, dashbot, etc., which are basically the all-in-one kind of bot analytic platforms. But for us, they weren't really fit for purpose. It's not something that we actually could use. And the reason for this is, you know, one of kind of three reasons. Firstly, for what we actually wanted to use it for, it was incredibly expensive actually. Secondly, when we looked at it, a lot of the data that we wanted was kind of all over the place, and it was really confusing to showcase it to our clients. But thirdly, and basically the most reason why we didn't choose it is because it was very difficult to customize for what we wanted. So what did we want? We wanted basically a solution that was going to aggregate all of our data from different points in our business and basically pull into one solution so that we could analyze all of that. But it was going to provide like insights into the chatbot, but it was also going to be able to scale to our clients so that we could provide an external view that was slightly different to the one that we had internally, obviously for good reasons. And then also customizable as like the business evolved. You know, we needed to track different things as the business evolved. But being a startup, we needed something super fast and super cheap because startup life. So my girlfriend, who's here tonight, very smug that she pointed me in the direction of this kind of solution. So she talked to me a little bit about Google Data Studio as an analytics kind of visualization tool. Now, who here has heard about Google Data Studio? Raise your hand. Okay, so we got a few. So I hadn't heard of it before, but basically what it is essentially a data visualization tool offered by Google. It's extremely pretty easy to use. It doesn't require any kind of coding or know-how or knowledge at all, and it can scale very quickly with your chatbot metrics. So I'm going to try and give you like a little demo here, but it may not work with me holding the microphone as well. So let me try. I'm not sure how this is going to work. Maybe, can you guys hear me if I do that? Yeah. Okay, cool. So, we're just going to show you like a very basic way that you can get up and running with Data Studio with some of your really basic metrics. Here, I've just got an example spreadsheet of like a data set. This is basically unmatched phrases. Think about, you know, a customer just says something stupid that your chatbot just cannot recognize. This is an example data set. And so if we pull over to Data Studio now, I can, you know, start I don't know what's going on at the bottom there. I can start like a new basically report or a new dashboard and basically port in that data from Sheets. So let's select that, unmatched phrases, Sheet 1, okay, let's connect that. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of, just ignore this for a second. You don't need to worry about what I'm doing here. It's very boring stuff. But I'm going to add that data to my report, and then I can basically play around it in any way that I want. I kind of visualize it in any way I want. So let's just draw a really quick kind of bar graph, and I'm going to choose a dimension as the phrase. And there you go. You can see like with under like 20 seconds, we basically mapped like unmatched phrases from high to low. But let's just push that into a pie chart, because there's a bit, oh, whoops. Let's actually not do that, sorry. Let's put that into a pie chart because it's a little bit easier to look at. And then let's also just do a time series, so just to say, okay, when has the users requested these specific unmatched phrases, or when, at what times of day, or what dates have they done this? Let's break this down by phrase, so we can see, okay, at certain times people were requesting, you know, some pretty tricky phrase, at other dates, etc., etc. And then what we can do is, if we're porting this to an external client, we can put in like a date filter for them, and then we can also add in, like, say, another filter for if they want to filter on basically the users, etc. And then we can basically view that, you know, dashboard, very simple dashboard there. Let's say, okay, we want to filter on the date range for the last 7 days. You kind of get like a different output there, so you can see actually the last 7 days, some irritating joke was actually the most common unmatched phrase. But let's also filter down on like specific users, etc. This specific user, okay, he was, you know, he had these 2 phrases over the last 2 days. So that is, in a nutshell, a very, very, very basic display of kind of Google Data Studio. Now, obviously, in the real world and in the wild, we don't use Google Sheets. We use Google BigQuery, which is basically a managed database from Google again, that is extremely cheap. Basically, and it works very well with large data sets. So you basically pay per query, you don't really pay for the storage unless it's over a certain amount, but I'll get to that later. And this marriage of these kind of two like Google Data Studio and Google BigQuery has really, really easily allowed us to basically chart all of the traditional metrics you would have around chatbots, like basically everything you want. So it kind of replicates all of those standalone analytics solutions very, very simply. So you've got your conversion funnels, here's some examples, more complex stuff like cohort analysis, etc. But also it allowed us to send like really tailored reports to our clients, and this is really, really useful because some clients are going to say, okay, we want to know this specific piece of information which we do not care about on a day-to-day on a dashboard, and this allows us to really scale quite quickly and get somebody on the job and like ping it out in about 10 minutes or so. But what it was actually invaluable for, and what I think I want to talk to you a bit about today, I don't know what's going on there. The GIFs seem to be just screwing everything up. Apologies. Sorry about the GIF things. But basically, it allowed us to port in data from other sources and analyze that alongside our conversation data. Basically giving us a complete view of our business and understanding conversation metrics outside of just the conversation. And that's what the real key insights today is. You need to understand your conversation metrics outside of just the conversation. So 3 examples I'm going to talk to you a little bit about is firstly, highlighting technical bottlenecks and failures. So what it is really invaluable for is showcasing when your system fails. So you can port in like, okay, your code deployments, which I'm showing here, with your conversation metrics. So you can see here on this slide here, we have conversation completions is the blue line metric, and you can see on the left-hand side is tagging along in a pretty okay space. And then our red bars are our code deployments. That's when we release new software into the system. And you can see in this particular deployment, we introduced a quite large bug, which basically failed to build context for the chatbot. So it was essentially just stuck at misunderstanding what the user was saying. And so you can see this yellow line skyrocket, which is confusion statements around the chatbot. And then we get to the second red line, which is us fixing the problem pretty quickly, and everything goes slightly back to normal. So what this has been really great for is being able to visualize that data so we can jump on this stuff ASAP, but also do a post-mortem analysis afterwards and say, okay, what went wrong, why did we do this, etc. But also, if you want to get slightly more into the technical space, is kind of understanding which systems you can make more efficient and which systems you can make better to make your conversations tick along better. Okay, second major thing. The ability to port in kind of external revenue and like your expenditure into this kind of overall view of your picture alongside your chatbot metrics is really, really, really useful. because you understand, okay, what specific actions am I taking to optimize in the chatbot that is actually affecting my baseline. Okay, it's a real good North Star to understand and get your like whole business behind saying, if we make these changes, it's going to affect our day-to-day lives. But what it's also really useful for is adjusting things so that they actually show the correct figures and that people aren't looking at the wrong kind of metrics. So what I mean by that is if you look on the left-hand side here, you would think that, okay, there's 2 restaurants here, Derry and Hull, and you would say, okay, if we just had those metrics, you'd say Derry is performing better. Let's look at what Derry's doing, let's look at the users who are at Derry and see what the hell is going on there that we can optimize. But actually, if we put in the marketing data and the marketing costs, you understand that actually we've just spent a whole load of money on Derry. It's actually nothing to do with the conversation or the users there. It's just that we have spent a whole load more, and actually Hull is performing at a much more efficient rate. So it's tagging those specific metrics to add to bias in your business and kind of putting everyone on the right path. The final thing I want to discuss, and I'm sorry, I guess it's running on a little bit, is optimizing or like giving you visuals to your wider discovery funnel. So basically, who your users are and where they're coming from. So this is a really simple graph here, which is just showcasing that Twitter mentions around a certain brand are going to lead to uptake in chatbot sessions for us specifically. And so this is great for understanding, okay, which channels are really driving traffic to my chatbot, but also which channels are the most efficient. Because going back to the startup mentality again, you don't want to be spending a whole load of money on Facebook advertising if actually a couple of people doing some Twitter mentions is much more efficient for you. So, there's a lot of other things that I could go on to about having this holistic picture that Google Data Studio allows us to do is really, really beneficial, but it basically scales with your business and it scales with the kind of the stuff you want to track, and the sky's the limit. I'm going to leave it there. And the great thing about this, the whole thing, is that it is completely and utterly free. Google Data Studio is a free service. Google BigQuery is completely free for under 1 terabyte of query data. We're not going to hit that anytime soon. So it's really understanding, do I need to pay for these kind of services? So learnings that I want you guys to take forward from this. First of all, if you're not currently storing your data, and I don't mean, okay, yeah, I'm storing my data on a third-party system, I'm hoping they're going to take care of it. You need to be storing your data. And you need to be doing it in a way that is easy for you to query so it doesn't bite you down the line. I spoke to too many people who have said, oh yeah, we're letting those guys take care of that, we're letting those guys handle it. You need to be holding on to that. It's very, very important. Second of all is you need to basically get your metrics in a place that all of them point in the same direction, or you need to identify a certain metric that you as a business identify with and point everything towards that. It's going to get everyone else pointing in the right direction, and you're going to get a lot more cohesion when you're making decisions about the chatbot and the kind of directions you want to go. Also, it can lead to you actually finding things that you couldn't actually think about before. For example, let's say, okay, should we optimize a chatbot, or actually should we just reduce our infrastructure costs, or should we reduce the amount we're paying to onboard clients? All of this stuff needs to come into your thinking when you're analyzing chatbot stuff. It's not just about the conversation. Thirdly and lastly, do not pay for something unless you really have to. Our experience is I hope it's testament that basically building this solution was by far a better decision for us in the longer run, and actually the shorter run, than paying for something outright. And also, that traditional argument of, okay, buy or build, something's going to be faster. Actually, I don't really buy that. I think building can actually be faster, and in a lot of cases is more preferable. Right, so that's everything, guys. I appreciate you for listening to talk about data after a very long talk, a very long evening. So yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Hugo Rutt, or ping me an email at hugo@string.io, but obviously I'll be hanging around afterwards for beers.
Is there any questions? There might not be. Yes.
You're going to hate me.
Okay.
You are going to hate me.
Okay. Go for it.
Why would I not use why would I not use SQL and D3?
So, good question. D3 is a little bit unwieldy, I find.
CSV, I can do D3.
So, no. So I think we as developers are thinking about this in a specific way that we probably shouldn't be. What you want to be thinking about is a scalable business, and you realistically don't want to have a couple of guys who could be doing more beneficial things to your business focusing on analytics when you can get actually somebody who is part of business partnerships or is working with a client very closely to focus on the metrics that actually matter to them. So while I think SQL D3 is probably a good solution and it is free, you've got to be thinking about customization and also shipping it off to people who are non-technical, who can be doing other stuff.
That was the right question. That was the right answer.
Yeah. But I'm sorry, it's just, yeah, I think there's a guy at the back there.
You mentioned there about North Star metrics.
Yes.
What are some examples?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to say that. I had it, but I kind of got swept up there. So specifically for us, North Star metrics is orders. So it's okay, how many orders are we processing this week? And we can see, okay, this action, if we optimize this, it's going to lead to more orders. So what I'm trying to say about North Star metrics is that there is a lot of things that gets into that. So orders, obviously, there's stuff about optimizing the payments and etc. But if you have one metric that you can focus on, it's much clearer to translate to everyone else what they need to be doing. So I think other examples of North Star metrics are stuff like revenue, potential user growth, maybe one. Stuff like retention as well is also a very key North Star metric. But I tend to try and bring those into the business domain because I think a lot of the guys in the chatbot space, they try and do those North Star metrics in the chatbot space when actually we're a business. We're trying to make money. We're trying to grow a business. So while I think North Star metrics are great for the product, I actually prefer North Star metrics that are in your business. And so that's why we've chosen orders, because that translates to revenue, that translates to us getting more cash, etc. So try and think about it that way. That's probably not a good answer, but yeah. Anything else? No, I think everyone's ready for the beer. Good shout. Okay, thanks guys.